When my husband texted that he was dumping me for a 20-year-old and had already drained our joint account, I simply replied, "All right." He didn't know I'd moved every asset into my name weeks earlier. By the time he figured it out, he was the one left with nothing. The text arrived in the middle of a perfectly ordinary afternoon, while I was helping customers at my boutique. I remember the way the sunlight filtered through the front windows, soft and almost golden. Glinting across the display of new spring scarves, I remember adjusting the price tag on a silk wrap when my phone buzzed. I didn't even look at it at first. My days were full of small, constant interruptions. But when I finally glanced down, the message glared back at me like something torn from a bad movie script. "I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account." Ha ha. That ha-ha at the end was the cruelest part. Not the betrayal, not the cowardice, not even the childish fantasy of running off with a girl barely out of college. No. The ha-ha, the laugh, the mockery, the casual dismissal of 12 years of marriage, of shared holidays, of the mortgage payments we'd struggled through, of the dinners where I'd waited for him late into the night. But my hands didn't shake as I read it. My voice didn't waver as I helped Mrs. Peterson pick out a scarf she'd been eyeing for weeks. The only sign that my husband had just detonated the remains of our marriage in a single text message was a slight tightening around my eyes, a faint pressure behind my ribs, almost like a bruise forming beneath the skin. I waited until Mrs. Peterson left, her purchase wrapped neatly in our signature silver paper, before typing my response. Good luck. Just that 2 words, clean, sharp, and calm. My name is Claire. I am 38 years old, and that day I received the most callous goodbye imaginable. But the strangest part? I didn't cry. I didn't whisper. Why me? I didn't sink to the floor clutching my chest. While Mark was probably imagining me in a dramatic heap on our living room carpet, devastated and abandoned, I was calmly locking up my boutique, turning the key with steady hands. Because the signs had been there for months. The late nights at work that never aligned with his paycheck deposits, the sudden password changes on his phone, the fresh gym obsession, the new clothes that didn't match his usual style, the way he'd started using slang awkwardly, like he was trying to mimic a younger crowd. 3 months ago, I'd found a receipt for dinner for 2 at a fancy restaurant, on a night he claimed to be working late. I still remember the way my stomach tightened, but not because of heartbreak. It was more the quiet acceptance of a truth that had been circling me for years. That same evening, I opened a separate bank account at a different bank. 1 week later, when he mentioned wanting to combine our finances to simplify things, I'd smiled sweetly and agreed. All while transferring my personal savings to the newly opened account, he thought he was clever. But I had been preparing quietly, methodically. The joint account he'd proudly emptied, it held just enough to keep him from getting suspicious. 2 months of regular deposits. The rest of my money, my real money, was safe, along with detailed records of every suspicious transaction he'd made for a year. My phone buzzed again. "Don't bother begging. Melissa and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later." Melissa, the new receptionist at his office. I had met her at the Christmas party, young, bright-eyed, with a laugh that came a little too easily whenever Mark spoke. I'd watched her touch his arm, thinking she was being subtle. She was young enough to be his daughter, and naive enough to think she was special. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my lawyer. "It's time," I said simply. She didn't sound surprised. "The papers are ready. I'll file them tomorrow. Do you want him served in Miami?" "No rush. Let him think he's won." Another text arrived moments later. "I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy." My little shop. The boutique I had built from scratch, funded myself, grown into a thriving business. more profitable than his middle management job? A little shop. I smiled faintly, imagining the certified letters that would soon arrive in Miami, each one a carefully aimed reminder that he'd never understood the laws that protected me. That night, I stayed in our house. My house. The one I'd inherited from my grandmother and kept solely in my name, despite his constant suggestions to add him to the deed for simplicity. Another instinct that had paid off beautifully. While organizing documents for my lawyer, I found our wedding album. Mark looked different back then. Before the desperation to recapture his youth turned him into a midlife crisis in human form, now he wore shirts too tight for his softening body, tried too hard to relate to 20-somethings, and used slang that sounded ridiculous coming from a 45-year-old man. My phone buzzed again. "I've been planning this for months. Melissa understands me in ways you never could. You'll find someone your own age already told my family. We grew apart." I screenshotted each message and added them to my evidence folder. Then came his masterpiece. "B2W, I used the joint card to book our flights and hotel. Consider it my parting gift. LOL. Perfect. I called the credit card company. I need to report fraudulent charges." The representative was professional, but I could hear the underlying satisfaction as she canceled the flights and hotel reservations. Mark and Melissa would arrive at the airport the next morning to find their grand escape dissolved into a puddle of declined transactions. The next morning, I silenced my phone as a dozen angry messages from Mark rolled in. "What did you do? The tickets are canceled. The hotel won't let us check in." By noon, his mother called. "Claire, dear, Mark told us everything. He says you're being vindictive." Did he mention emptying our joint account? Or charging flights with his girlfriend on our card? Silence, then, reluctantly. Well, he did seem cruel. By evening, word had spread through mutual friends. Mark and Melissa were stuck in a budget motel near the airport. His personal credit cards were maxed out. Their Miami dream evaporated overnight. On Monday, the emergency hearing was held. Mark arrived in his too tight designer clothing, looking like a man who had Googled "dress like a younger guy," and committed fully to the wrong suggestions. Melissa waited outside, her anxious youth painfully obvious under the courthouse lights. My lawyer presented everything: the texts, the receipts, the fraud, the proof of my separate assets, the business documents he never bothered to read. Mark's lawyer attempted a weak defense. "My client admits to rash decisions, but Mrs. Harrison has been calculating." "Prudent," my lawyer corrected. "Protective. Smart." The judge agreed. Mark protested when told to return the stolen funds within 24 hours. "That money's gone." "Then I suggest you find a way to replace it," the judge said coolly. When we exited the courtroom, Melissa's voice trembled as she asked, "Mark, what now?" His answer was lost in the echo of my heels clicking confidently across the marble. The next few weeks revealed everything I'd already known. Mark was unraveling. His claims that the boutique was half his were demolished by my records. His attempt to gain sympathy from his family failed when they saw the screenshots. Even Melissa left him, posting about toxic relationships before quietly removing him from her life. Soon, he was living at his sister's for a while, then at his parents' house, 45 years old and back in his childhood bedroom. Meanwhile, my boutique thrived. Customers flocked in, some specifically wanting to support me. The business grew, opportunities expanded. I became a symbol of resilience in my community. Months passed. Mark tried dating apps but couldn't attract much interest. His job reprimanded him for the inappropriate workplace relationship. His promotion evaporated. His financial situation crumbled. My life moved upward, steadily and gracefully. I opened a second boutique, then a third. I was featured in business magazines. Young entrepreneurs sought my advice. Even Melissa came one day, apologizing, admitting she'd learned her lesson. Now, years later, I keep one thing framed in my office, the very text Mark sent the day he thought he'd destroyed me. Have fun with your little shop. Below it hangs my latest business award. And every time I see them together, I remember something powerful and quiet inside me. Sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be.